Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. The Radio and TV News Endowment, a fund established by listeners and viewers to sustain reporting of Indiana news. More information at indianapublicmedia.org/support. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The midterm election is just a few months away, and evidence of foreign meddling is causing some to question the integrity of the country's voting system.
It's not just one thing, it's not just one issue, it's a whole slew of them that we need to address.
Ahead, we'll look at how Indiana is preparing to increase security ahead of November. The federal government is offering help to farmers who are suffering from the impact of tariffs. Coming up, why some say throwing money at the trade war isn't going to fix it. And a partnership between Purdue University and INDOT is preparing Hoosier roads for autonomous vehicles.
It's really important for us to understand how pavement markings and the signs are going to be visible to connected and autonomous vehicles.
Coming up, the future of transportation in Indiana. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Some Hoosiers are worried their votes could be compromised because of Russian interference in elections. Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill confirmed this week that Russian hackers tried to break into her computer network in 2017. That's raising even more questions about the extent to which Russia will try to interfere in the 2018 election. As Congress considers how to improve election security, state and local governments are taking their own precautions. As Barbara Brozier reports, Indiana's system has several vulnerabilities.
Summertime in the Greene County Voter Registration Office is relatively quiet, but that will change soon. With a competitive midterm election coming in November, the office will be flooded with potential voters and just as many questions.
When we have people that come in to vote early, a lot of them always make comments about security.
It's something on the mind of not only Hoosiers, but voters across the country. Increasing concern about hacking of voting systems led the election board here to pass a resolution earlier this month to ensure elections aren't compromised. It puts into writing several protocols the county was already practicing, like keeping voting machines and electronic poll books in a restricted access room. You have to travel to the courthouse's basement and through 2 locked doors to find them, and even I couldn't get inside. There are only 2 keys to the room.
We have a logbook that the individual, whoever they'll sign their name, the reason they were there, and the date and the time.
Even when the voting machines are in use, they aren't online.
Data is transferred from that voting machine to a standalone computer, and then those results are accumulated like on a jump drive or that's transferred then to a machine where it can be uploaded to the state.
But that doesn't mean the county's election process can't be compromised. Scott Shackelford is chair of Indiana University's cybersecurity program. He says there are still plenty of vulnerabilities in Indiana's system.
Unfortunately, no system is 100% secure, and even if these voting machines that we're discussing are air-gapped, which means they're unplugged from the public internet, there are still ways to interfere with them, such as through USB drives, for example.
Several recent reports recommend Indiana take a number of steps to improve the integrity of its elections. The Center for American Progress gave the state a failing grade in an election security analysis released earlier this year. It says the state doesn't back up voting machines with a paper record and doesn't mandate post-election audits to test for accuracy. And a Pew Trust analysis from 2014 ranks Indiana 31st on its overall Elections Performance Index, which assesses factors like data completeness, post-election audits, and ballot problems.
So if you really wanted to attack Indiana's, for example, voting integrity, you wouldn't have to just go after the voting machines. You could, for example, go after websites that people go to figure out where their polling places are. You could snarl traffic. You could shut down the power grid in a worst-case scenario in certain core swing counties.
The Indiana Secretary of State's office plans to use nearly $7.6 million in grant funding from the federal government to try and address some of those issues. Among other things, the money will be used to evaluate election computers and harden the network systems they use. The state also plans to deploy voting systems that can be audited and improve election night reporting. There's also a new network that allows election officials to better communicate about problems.
We now have something called a voting ISAC, an information sharing and analysis center, to help these election officials share cyber threat data and best practices across the country.
But Shackelford says it's not enough to stop interference in November. He says that shouldn't impact whether Hoosiers decide to cast a ballot, because that's exactly what those trying to infiltrate the election system are hoping for. That's why in Greene County, they're doing everything they can to educate people before they cast their votes. And the issue of integrity is one they expect will continue to come up.
We just try to reassure people that Indiana especially, there's some of the things you might hear about nationally, there's not available to do in Indiana.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
Something ingrained in people's memories is the hanging Chad incident in 2000 and raised an unprecedented number of questions about the country's election system. After that, the federal government pumped a lot of money into upgrading voting infrastructure, but that's nearly been 2 decades. Amid all the controversy over Russia, GOP leaders voted down a Democratic plan last week to increase election security funding. Republicans maintain that Congress has always fully funded election security and more money isn't necessary. But security experts warn just the perception of possible system vulnerabilities could be enough to significantly undermine public trust in the election process. President Trump's visit to the Midwest yesterday came less than 48 hours after the Agriculture Department announced a $12 billion emergency package for farmers suffering from the effects of the U.S. trade war with China.
We just opened up Europe for you farmers. You're not going to be too angry with Trump.
But experts say that doesn't change the fact that with tariffs on Chinese goods and subsidies for farmers, American taxpayers are getting hit twice by Trump's trade policy. Brock Turner reports.
David Myers is a 6th-generation farmer in Decatur County. He grows corn, soybeans, and wheat on land that's been in his family for more than a century. Myers and other farmers throughout Indiana have lost $2 per bushel on soybeans and 80 cents per bushel on corn, thanks to tariffs and strong yields. But Myers remains optimistic. He has to. He's one of many farmers keeping their trust in President Trump.
While the tariffs have somewhat to blame, I believe that President Trump is doing the right thing for the country long term. Is it painful for us farmers today? Yes. But long term, I think it's exactly the right thing to do. We need to get on a level, equal playing field with the rest of the world.
Dr. Wallace Tyner is a professor of agricultural economics at Purdue University. He says the impact on farmers across the country is significant. Exports to China are down 68%, while total exports are down by about half of that.
This is called trade diversion. And so the exports we were sending to China, we'll now send to other countries. So our total export drop will be about 29%.
Tyner says many of the farmers he's spoken to are reluctant about taking the bailouts. The federal government has released few details about how it plans to distribute the money, so it's unclear how much Indiana will get. And not all of the funding will go to farmers in the form of aid. The $12 billion will be split amongst 3 areas that include researching new markets, sending excess product to food banks, and providing direct incentives to individual farmers. Like many farmers, Myers is worried about what all this political talk means for his livelihood. He doesn't like the idea of taking the bailout, but is left with little choice.
And the truth of the matter is we'd probably rather not have the subsidies, but I guarantee you there will be a line at the USDA office in Greensburg signing up for the programs. So whether we like to take them or don't like to take them, we're going to be in line.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
Tyner says the bailouts actually break international monetary fund rules. That's because government payments to farmers are supposed to be based on yields rather than profits. He says Canada is already preparing a case against the United States. Now for headlines, we go over to Lindsay Wright, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Hey, Joe, thanks. The Indiana man who told police he was en route to a gay pride event when he was found with a loaded rifle and explosives in his car has been sentenced to more than 7 years in prison. James Wesley Howell pleaded no contest this week to weapons and explosive charges. Police stopped Howell in July 2016 with a loaded assault rifle and 15 pounds of chemicals ready to explode. He told police he was headed to a gay pride event in West Hollywood hours after 49 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub in Florida. The Indiana Recovery Alliance and the Indiana State Department of Health opened up for free hepatitis A vaccinations in Bloomington this week. IRA Director Chris Abert hopes the free vaccination event will serve as a check on the growing outbreak.
It makes a lot of sense to utilize our services to make sure that the hepatitis A doesn't spread through Monroe County, given that it's so close, just 20 minutes south of us where it is spreading.
Lawrence County is one of the communities seeing a spike in the number of hepatitis A cases. The state says more than 280 people have been diagnosed since November. The Environmental Protection Agency solidified a rule this week that says farmers officially don't have to report toxic emissions from animal waste and other pollutants. It could have implications for Hoosiers living near confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. The rule had been on hold. While the EPA's decision is a relief for farmers, it takes away a playing card for environmentalists who say now there's no federal law regulating air emissions for CAFOs. Lawyers for Attorney General Curtis Hill say he welcomes the appointment of special prosecutor to help investigate allegations that he drunkenly groped a lawmaker and 3 legislative staffers. Hill's attorneys say they'll cooperate with attorney Daniel Sigler as he reviews the state inspector general's eventual findings and determines whether Hill should face criminal charges. Hill's supporters announced the formation of a legal fund this week to help pay for the official's legal defense. Indiana's Planned Parenthood and ACLU leaders celebrated their latest victory in court this week. A federal appeals court ruled a 2016 Indiana law that required women have an ultrasound at least 18 hours before their abortion was unconstitutional. It's the 7th such lawsuit the state has lost since 2011.
I would hope that at some point, someone in the legislature decides that maybe that is not the best use of time and ultimately the state of Indiana's money.
Some wonder whether looming changes at the U.S. Supreme Court could mean different results in the future. Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky President and CEO Christy Gillespie says she's concerned about that. On the other side, Attorney General Curtis Hill says in a statement he's disappointed by the court's ruling. An Indianapolis church that displayed statues of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus in a cage has replaced the Holy Family with a mirror so visitors can imagine themselves in a cage. The church originally put the cage out to protest the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy. The dean says he changed the display so visitors can envision themselves enduring the pain felt by detained and separated families.
The first icon with the Holy Family was meant to show how God loves us and how we should respond to God's love for us. This is meant to do the second of the 2 great commandments, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Can we see ourselves in somebody else's shoes?
The caged Holy Family display appeared earlier in July. President Donald Trump has since reversed his policy separating families detained at the border. The company cited for safety violations in connection to the death of a construction worker at Indiana University has reached a settlement with the Indiana Department of Labor. The Safety and Health Administration Department cited rock-solid masonry with 4 serious violations and assessed a fine of more than $11,000. As part of a settlement, the company agreed to pay about $10,000. Officials say the amount was reduced because the company immediately corrected procedures. Bloomington's new controversial CERT vehicle has completed its inaugural run. The police department used the armored truck this week in a welfare check that ended in a suicide. The Sheriff's Department says the team used the vehicle primarily to ensure the safety of a negotiator who was trying to communicate with the armed man who was inside. Well, the company that operates a bike share at Indiana State University is shutting down the program. San Francisco-based company Spin provided the 130 bikes. It's ditching bike share operations across the country in favor of its scooter sharing services. ISU's program only just started in April, but has racked up more than 10,000 rides since then. The university is considering multiple options, including partnering with another company like Spin or offering the program through the university. And Joe, it's, they were very disappointed that they said that they're going to work on getting something figured out pretty quickly because they see the benefit in having that program on campus.
Well, and we see Bloomington's PACE program kick off just recently too. So there are different options out there. Hopefully they can find something.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Self-driving cars are still a ways off, but researchers at Purdue University are bringing some of that futuristic technology to Hoosier roads. And we'll look at a small-town library that's getting a big upgrade. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
In a time of change, where can you find in-depth reporting and thoughtful analysis? Washington Week on PBS. Join moderator Robert Costa.
When I was at the Capitol this week, I encountered the same.
And a panel of award-winning journalists.
You're seeing a divided nation and you're seeing...
For insights and perspective.
Tonight there was a key development in the
Senate. You won't find anywhere else.
What a week.
Washington Week.
Friday evening at 8.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Self-driving cars are still years away, but the technology that will make them work is on the ground in Indiana. And as Tyler Lake reports, experts say those innovations are already making some roads in the state safer.
Aggregate it and anonymize it so that we don't...
Darcy Bullock likes collaborating. Bullock directs the Joint Transportation Research Program at Purdue University. He and his colleagues are paving the way for autonomous cars.
You get those stakeholders at the table, and they're part of it, and so it's not just a narrow, siloed research project, but you've got agencies that have come together, so when you're ready for implementation, they've already had that conversation, so implementation works much better.
Researchers here partner closely with the Indiana Department of Transportation, where they use technology to make improvements to road safety and traffic flow. Take this corridor along U.S. Route 231, for example. It uses a mix of technology to create an environment where traffic signals and vehicles talk to each other. If your car knows when a light will change, it can use fuel more efficiently. But it could also make the intersection a lot safer.
We all see close calls at signalized intersections on a routine basis. Those close calls are early indicators that will be much better. They'll be leading indicators so we can identify intersections that might be experiencing some safety issues that we need to identify mitigating measures. If we can find that before the crashes happens, that's a win for everybody.
It seems futuristic, but it's already here. You can see these devices at stoplights near the Purdue campus. And now major automotive manufacturers are jumping in. Toyota recently announced all its new vehicles will be able to talk to these connected sensors. Each new development, like the Smart Corridor, is helping usher in the era of the self-driving car. But in the near term, every step along the way is helping make roads safer for drivers. A lot of money that supports Bullock's team comes from the State Transportation Department.
We are partnered with the state, and the state needs to have both a near-term and a long-term return on investment. So as we can identify these use cases where we can improve conditions today and then lay the groundwork for infrastructure for 15, 20 years and train the students, that's a wonderful scenario.
Self-driving cars require tons of data from your vehicle to work safely and effectively, and that can give some people pause. That's why Bullock sees the trucking industry as a good place to start implementing this new technology. $550 billion of freight moves into, out of, or through the state. And being at the forefront of these advances could be a boon for Indiana.
Commercial vehicle space is going to be the early wins on that. They already have monitoring systems in place. The private sector has a strong interest. The large carriers want safe operations, and they've got good policies in place.
Indiana recently passed a law that allows semi-trucks to form small groups to improve safety and fuel efficiency. It's called platooning.
And we say truck platooning, what this really includes is advanced technology on the trucks that have enhanced safety systems, and then an electronic coupling between the trucks so that they can have close following distances. The benefits that has is it can reduce fuel consumption 10 to 12%.
The technology required to make platooning work, like follow distance sensors, will make trucks safer whether or not they're linked together. But to make autonomous vehicles a reality, they'll need to be able to understand where they are and what's around them. And that's where the LiDAR van comes into play.
The autonomous cars will have lower grade type of these sensors, but this one is designed mainly to give you very accurate digital map of the infrastructure.
These sensors and cameras can map out everything around the van within an inch or two, right down to the road markers between lanes. The detailed maps vehicles like the LiDAR van creates will be part of what autonomous cars use in order to navigate their surroundings. This information is vital to autonomous transportation, but it's only one small piece of a large and complicated puzzle that must be solved before self-driving cars can become ubiquitous. The devil may be in the details when it comes to autonomous vehicles, but many of those details are being ironed out, and a little more quickly than you might think. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
Bullock says we will see connected trucks driving down U.S. roads in the next few months, and he anticipates platooning will come to Indiana in the next year. The small city of Lagodi will triple the size of its library using a more than $1 million loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The funding focuses on improving facilities in rural communities, and Lagodi is the first town to use it for a library.
This 3,000 square foot building has been home to the Lagodi Library since 2006, but it dates back to the 70s.
It was a restaurant for several years. It was Matthias's restaurant. So occasionally we still get people that come in and you ask, can we help you? And they say, we want a beer and a steak.
Because the building wasn't constructed to house all these books, the staff keeps running into challenges.
As you look around in our library, you can see there's very little place to sit down, and really the space in general is just limited.
That means many of the programs offered here have to happen outside of the building. There isn't even enough room to put the library's entire collection on display. At the same time, more people are using the facility.
I mean, the library is used more now than it ever has been in the whole history of it being founded. The numbers are have skyrocketed.
It led the library to request a $1.3 million bond to build a new facility, but voters turned it down. So the town applied for funding through the USDA Community Facilities Direct program, which is more affordable than a traditional loan.
So with the USDA loan, it stretches out 40 years. So that lowers your payments and makes it way more affordable.
The loan will enable the town to build a new 9,000 square foot building on land donated by St. Vincent de Paul. The plans include adding more meeting space and room for additions later on. Leaders say the new library will be a valuable resource, not just for Lagodi, but the entire county.
I can't even, imagine all the possibilities.
The city hopes to break ground on the project by October. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
And a new gallery in Bargersville wants to give adults with disabilities memorable work experiences. And as a result, it hopes to leave a lasting impact on the community. The Hope Gallery is a boutique that sells artwork, crafts, and other items. It's largely operated by volunteer team members who have disabilities. They help customers in the gallery, check them out at the register, and wrap up the gifts.
Clearly, they're going to have meaningful employment, and they just shine when they're here. They're so happy. They're so proud of themselves.
Many of the items and artwork sold in the gallery are also made by people who have disabilities. Callahan says they hope to eventually bring in an occupational therapist who can work on site with team members on their projects and artwork. The foundation that started the store is a nonprofit, so all proceeds go toward keeping the Hope Gallery open. The Hope Gallery is holding its grand opening Saturday, August 4th from noon to 5. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. The Radio and TV News Endowment, a fund established by listeners and viewers to sustain reporting of Indiana news. More information at indianapublicmedia.org/support. And by WTIU members. Thank you.